All right, hello. This is just going to be I've been sick, so you have to bear with me. I've kind of lost my voice here, but just wanted to do a quick check-in and review on what I've been reading. I'm not going to do a bunch of individual book reviews for all these books, or otherwise you'll be getting like a book review every day. So I'm just going to touch on them real quick. I read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain and finished this. This is a direct sequel, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. It picks up right where that book left off. It's a little bit more serious than that one. Huck and Jim, a runaway slave, they're basically they join up together and they go down the Mississippi River on a series of adventures. But it's kind of a coming of age story of Huck and also a satirical commentary on the antebellum South. So it's more deep than Tom Sawyer, for sure. It may not be for everybody. This is often on a banned books list due to its use of the N word because it uses the N word more than a Quentin Tarantino film. So you might be offended by that. But it was a very enjoyable book. Another book that I recently finished, which I'm reading, is The Earth is Weeping by Peter Cozzens, the epic story of the Indian Wars for the American West. Now, I'll probably end up reading this book a second time. I went through it and took a bunch of notes and highlighted a bunch of stuff, but I do want to go through it once more and give it another pass because I'm having a discussion with Stephen Heiner on his channel on May 10th. So I'd like to familiarize myself a little bit more with the material in here before doing that. But this is not a comprehensive work. This book, the Earth is Weeping, really only covers the period from like the 1860s to 1890. So when you're talking about the Indian Wars, you're talking basically about a conflict that began in 1492 with Columbus discovering the New World. So I wanted to get some more material. So I picked up this from my local library. It's pretty short. This is the Indian Wars. It's only a little over 100 pages. This one is written by, see, there's a series of these books here. You can see books in the American War series. There's a whole series of them, but this one's written by Don Nardo. Okay, and it's really kind of condensed, but it does have a nice chronology of events in the front, as you can see. So, for instance, 1607, John Smith establishes the first permanent English settlement in North America at Jamestown, Virginia, with extensive contact with the Powhatan Confederacy. And then it goes up to, seeing where it stops, it goes all the way up to 1983. President Reagan vetoes a $900,000 congressional land claim suit brought by the Pequot tribe against the state of Connecticut. So there is a chronology here. And it does cover wars of resistance, the first Indian War, Tecumseh, all of that. But like I said, it's not real in depth. So I did pick up a secondary book, which is The Indian Wars, the American Heritage History of the Indian Wars. This book was published in 1977. It's divided into two halves. So as you can see, it's written by Robert M. Utley and Wilcomb E. Washburn. So Wilcomb E. Washburn did the first half of this book, and Robert M. Utley did the second half. So the first half of this book covers 1492 to 1850, and the second half of the book covers from 1850 to 1890. So there's part one, the East, and you can see all the tribes that are over here. They all get driven to the west of the Mississippi after Andrew Jackson becomes president. You get the Indian Removal Act of 1830. The Spanish, okay, Spain is colonized down in Florida. They were eventually driven out, the Seminole Wars down here. Andrew Jackson ended up, I think, attacking Pensacola. And then James Monroe settled with Spain to acquire Florida from the Spanish. and make it a state, okay, in the United States. Of course, this book covers the early clashes with the French trappers that come over, the clashes between the French and the British for control of the Americas. Um, and also Spain was here because Spain had colonized California and Texas, and large portions of New Mexico, Arizona. In fact, that's where the Pueblo rose up in 1680. The Pueblo Indians revolted against the Spanish, drove them out, overturned the missions, killed a bunch of people, and set all the horses free that the Spanish brought here. That's where the horses come from, the wild Mustang of the American plains. Those were brought over. They're the offspring of the horses the Spanish brought. I think all the pigs in this country too came from like 11 pigs or something like that. So they set free the pigs and the sheep and the horses, and they became horse cultures. But yeah, this goes real in depth. Basically, the second half of this book is just a repeat of the material that is in the Peter Cozzens book. Not as in depth, but still, it's nice, mainly because of the amount of photographs and paintings that are in here. They're quite extensive. There's stuff on almost every single page, you know. So there's part two, the West. But paintings, photographs, there's some authentic like Native American art, pictographs or whatever you will. There's a section in here that had some really neat photos. Okay, here it is. The look at that. Isn't that great? I think there's like over 300 photos and illustrations in here, which made it a really great read. Really cool stuff. So even though it's kind of a complex topic, I mean, it's a kind of complex topic. It's a very complex topic, the Indian Wars, because you're basically talking about, like I said, like a 400-year conflict for control of the continent, North America and South America, because this wasn't, this doesn't really go into British Columbia and all the stuff that took place there, or down into Central and South America with the Spaniards and everything. It kind of touches on it, but this is mainly just the American, you know, United States expansionism, right? So although I read that and finished it, it's quite good. I did read one final book, which was this little short biography on Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States, by Rebecca Stefoff. And of course, this involved the first international conflict of the United States, the Spanish-American War in 1898. At that time, Theodore Roosevelt was the Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Navy and ordered that if hostilities broke out, he ordered the fleet to attack the Philippine Islands and drive the Spanish out of there. So as a result of the Spanish-American War, he resigned his post there and volunteered as a volunteer regiment as a colonel in the Rough Riders. Of course, the led an action near San Juan Hill, which he got famous for, became vice president, and then assumed the presidency after the assassination of President McKinley. So he was our really kind of like the first 20th century president. Like, the America's policy of interventionism really, I think, gets shaped by Teddy Roosevelt. For instance, the building of the Panama Canal, he used gunboat diplomacy essentially to force Colombia to, acknowledge Panama as an independent country. But as a result of the Spanish-American War in 1898, that's when the United States assumed control of Puerto Rico, Guam, Philippine Islands, Wake Island, Um, I think what American Samoa, did they get that as well? I mean, it was quite extensive. So interventionism, this was kind of the guy that was the guy most responsible for America's interventionist policy. Yeah, probably him and James Polk, and Douglas Monroe, the Monroe Doctrine. But I'm getting off on a side tangent. That's just what I read. I'm going to end it here, 10 minutes. I didn't feel like doing individual book reviews for all of these. I will probably read, like I said, Peter Cozzens' book one more time. I'm going to give it another pass through, take some notes on it this time around so that I get more familiar with the material. But that's it. Anyways, I don't got anything else. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.